My daughter told her CEO I was too embarrassing to attend Thanksgiving dinner. I'm Bill Davis, and for 2 years, Emma believed her father was an unemployed failure who dragged down her career prospects. What she didn't know? Her boss was my biggest client. The strategic insights that earned her a promotion came from our dinner conversations, and that exclusive networking dinner she was hosting to impress Austin's tech elite. I'd been invited to the same restaurant same night by the very people she wanted to hide me from. 10 days before Thanksgiving, I overheard her plan to exclude me. She told her fiancé I'd embarrass them in front of people who operate at a different level. I had a choice: stay hidden and let her live the lie, or show up in my $3,000 suit with contracts proving I earn more in a month than she makes in a year. I chose the truth. If you enjoy stories about family loyalty and hidden power, hit subscribe. I'd love to know where you're watching from in the comments. Here's how a father's quiet dignity became his daughter's biggest shock. The first sign came at Emma's company party last month. Technova Solutions had rented out this upscale venue in downtown Austin. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, the works. Emma had invited me as her plus one, and I was genuinely excited to see where my daughter worked. I wore my best suit. Granted, it was from 2019, before everything fell apart. But it was clean, pressed, and I thought I looked presentable. The CEO, Marcus Chen, was making his rounds, glad-handing employees and their families. When he got to Emma and me, she introduced me with this tight smile. "Marcus, this is my father, Bill Davis." "Nice to meet you, Bill," Marcus said, shaking my hand. "What line of work are you in?" There was this pause, this awful stretched silence where Emma's face went pale. "Dad is between opportunities right now," she said quickly. "The job market's been tough for people his age." Marcus nodded with that polite sympathy you give someone's unemployed relative. "Well, something will turn up, I'm sure." After he walked away, Emma grabbed my arm. "Dad, you can't just stand there saying nothing when people ask about work." I was going to answer. "With what? You've been unemployed for 2 years." The thing is, I had an answer, a very good answer. But something in her tone, the way she'd rushed to speak for me, made me keep quiet. The second sign was even worse. 3 weeks ago, Emma's boyfriend Tyler invited us to dinner at his parents' house. The Brooks family lived in this Tudor-style mansion in Westlake, easily worth $1.8 million. Tyler's father, Richard, was an early Google investor. His mother, Patricia, served on Stanford's board of trustees. The dining room table could seat 12. They used china that probably cost more than most people's cars. Everything was perfectly arranged, perfectly polite, perfectly designed to remind you of your place in the social hierarchy. "So, Bill," Richard said as we started the second course, "Tyler tells me you're looking for work. Tough market out there." "It can be challenging," I replied. "What field were you in?" Patricia asked. "Supply chain management and logistics optimization," I said. 35 years in manufacturing and distribution." Richard nodded. "Ah, the old economy. Must be hard watching everything go digital." Emma jumped in. "Dad's having trouble adapting to how business works now. It's all about agility and innovation." "Of course," Patricia said with that patronizing smile rich people perfect. "Well, there are always opportunities in retail or customer service for people with experience." Tyler looked uncomfortable. Emma looked mortified, not because of what they'd said to me, but because they'd said it at all. After dinner, as we walked to my 10-year-old Honda Civic parked between their Tesla and Mercedes, Emma finally exploded. "Dad, why didn't you just go along with the conversation? They were trying to be nice." "They were being condescending. They were networking. Richard knows half the tech executives in Austin. He could have made introductions." "For retail jobs?" "It's called starting somewhere and building relationships." I looked at my daughter, 28 years old, successful, beautiful, and absolutely convinced that I was a burden to her social climbing. "Emma, is that really what you think I should do? Stock shelves and hope Richard Brooks throws me a bone? I think you should be realistic about your options." That night, I sat in my small townhouse, the one I downsized to after selling our family home to pay for her mother's cancer treatments, and realized something had fundamentally shifted. My own daughter had written me off, but what Emma didn't know was that while she was busy being embarrassed by her unemployed father, I had been quietly building something that would shock her to her core. Let me be clear about what was at stake if I continued accepting this treatment from my own daughter. First, there was the money, not my money, hers. See, Emma had no idea that I'd been named the sole beneficiary of her late mother's life insurance policy. Sarah had insisted on a $2.1 million policy, even when we could barely afford the premiums. "Something happens to me," she'd said during her final months. "You make sure Emma gets everything she needs for her future." But sitting in that townhouse, watching my daughter dismiss 35 years of professional experience as worthless, I started questioning whether giving her that inheritance would actually help her future. Maybe the best thing I could do was let her learn to value people for who they are, not what they can provide. Second, there was our relationship itself. Every phone call had become shorter. Every visit felt like an obligation on her part. She'd started introducing me to her friends as someone she was helping through a rough patch, as if I were a charity case rather than the man who'd raised her. If I stayed silent about her Thanksgiving exclusion plan, I'd be teaching her that it was acceptable to treat family members as disposable when they became inconvenient. That love was conditional on social status. But the real stake, the one that kept me awake at night, was professional. You see, while Emma was telling everyone about my failed career, I had been building something extraordinary. Davis Strategic Solutions. LC wasn't just some consultant hanging out a shingle. In 18 months, I'd built a client roster that would make most Fortune 500 companies jealous. My specialty was helping traditional manufacturers navigate digital transformation and supply chain optimization. My average project fee was $74,000. Last month alone, I'd invoiced $89,000. The irony was suffocating. Emma worked for Technova Solutions, a mid-sized tech company struggling with their acquisition strategy. For 8 months, I'd been their primary strategic consultant, working directly with CEO Marcus Chen on a $15 million acquisition deal. Every brilliant insight Emma brought home from work, every strategic framework she'd excitedly explained over dinner, every innovative approach she'd discovered at Technova, it had all come from me. She was literally using my intellectual property to advance her career while publicly dismissing my professional expertise. The acquisition deal we'd just completed would save Technova $3.2 million in operational costs. Marcus had called it the most elegant strategic framework I've seen in 20 years. Emma's recent promotion to senior marketing manager? It happened 2 weeks after I'd advised Marcus that his marketing department needed stronger leadership and fresh perspectives. My daughter was succeeding because of my work, then coming home to lecture me about being realistic about my career options. But here's what really kept me up at night. If I revealed the truth about my consulting business, it would solve the immediate problem but create a bigger one. Bigger. Emma would feel betrayed that I'd hidden my success while letting her believe I was struggling. However, if I continued hiding it, she'd never learn to respect people regardless of their apparent circumstances. She'd marry Tyler, join his family's social circle, and spend the rest of her life judging people by their bank accounts and business cards. The stakes were simple but brutal. I could protect my daughter's feelings and enable her worst instincts, or I could protect her character and risk our relationship. 2 days after that dinner at the Brooks house, I made a decision that would change everything. I hired a private investigator to document how Emma really talked about me when I wasn't around. What I discovered would force me to choose between being an enabler and being a father. The call came on a Tuesday evening. I was in my basement office reviewing a supply chain analysis for a Fortune 500 client when my phone buzzed with Emma's number. "Dad, we need to talk about Thanksgiving." Her tone was different, more formal, like she was about to deliver bad news to a client. "Of course, what's on your mind?" "It's complicated. Tyler's family has certain expectations." I set down my pen. "About me specifically?" "It's not personal. It's about optics. Optics. Professional networking. You wouldn't understand the dynamics involved." That phrase hit like a slap. "Try me." "Dad, Tyler's grandparents are major Stanford donors. His father, Richard, has connections throughout the tech industry. Marcus Chen from my company will be there, along with several venture capitalists." Sounds like quite a guest list. "Exactly. This isn't just a family dinner. It's a career opportunity." I leaned back in my chair, surrounded by contracts and client files she knew nothing about. "And where do I fit in this career opportunity?" Another pause, longer this time. That's what I'm trying to explain. These people operate at a certain level. They make judgments quickly. First impressions matter. Emma, what are you saying? I'm saying maybe it would be better if you hosted a separate family dinner. Just the two of us. More intimate. More personal. The words hung in the air like smoke. My daughter was disinviting me from Thanksgiving so she could network with people who might advance her career. When did you decide this? It's not a decision. It's a practical consideration. When, Emma? We've been discussing options for a few weeks. We, Tyler and I, his family, Marcus from work. The room felt smaller suddenly. You've been discussing me with your boss? Not you specifically, just the guest list dynamics. I stood up, walking to the window that looked out onto my small backyard. What exactly did you tell them about these guest list dynamics? Dad, don't make this harder than it needs to be. Answer the question. Her voice dropped. I told them you're going through a career transition, that you might feel uncomfortable around people in their positions. Their positions. Dad, Richard Brooks has a net worth of $40 million. Marcus runs a company with 200 employees. These aren't people you network with at unemployment office. Something cold settled in my chest. So you told them I'd be uncomfortable. I told them it might be awkward for everyone. Everyone? Yes. I walked back to my desk, looking at the contract I'd been reviewing, a $200,000 consulting agreement with a company Marcus Chen had been trying to partner with for 6 months. Emma, what if I told you I wanted to come anyway? Dad, please don't do this. Do what? Make this about your pride. This is about my future. And what about my present? Your present is what it is. You're 61 and unemployed. I'm 28 and building a career. One of us has to be realistic. The line went quiet except for the sound of her breathing. Realistic, I repeated. Yes. Like when you got promoted last month? What does that have to do with anything? You said it was because of your brilliant strategic insights about market positioning. It was. The framework you used, the one about vertical integration versus horizontal expansion. Where did you learn that? Dad, I don't see how... Answer me. It's standard business theory. The specific phrasing, Emma. Market disruption requires strategic patience, not tactical aggression. Those exact words. Silence. You said that at dinner 3 months ago. You were so excited. Said it was revolutionary thinking that would change how Technova approached acquisitions. I don't remember. I do, because you learned it from me, over dinner, when I was explaining why traditional manufacturers failed during digital transitions. Her breathing changed. Dad, that's not... You've been using my professional expertise to advance your career while telling everyone I'm unemployable. That's not fair. Fair? You never told me it was anything more than general business knowledge. Because you never asked. You assumed. I assumed what? That unemployed equals ignorant. The silence stretched longer this time. Emma, answer me one question. When Marcus Chen talks about strategic frameworks, does he use the phrase elegant complexity? Sometimes. Why? Because that's my signature term. I've been using it for 15 years. Dad, you're not making sense. I'm making perfect sense. You just don't want to hear it. What exactly are you saying? I sat back down at my desk, looking at Marcus Chen's email thanking me for another brilliant strategic insight about supply chain optimization. I'm saying that maybe your unemployed father knows more about business than you think. Dad, this conversation is getting weird. You want to know what's weird? Your promotion happened 2 weeks after I advised someone in the tech industry that marketing departments need fresh leadership. That's coincidence. Is it? Dad, you're starting to sound paranoid. I smiled. Not because anything was funny, but because I finally understood how deep her assumptions ran. Emma, I'm going to ask you one more time. Do you want me at Thanksgiving dinner? I want you to understand why it's complicated. Yes or no? Long pause. No. Thank you for being honest. Dad, don't hang up angry. I'm not angry, Emma. I'm just finally clear about where we stand. I hung up the phone and stared at my computer screen, where Marcus Chen's latest message was waiting. Bill, looking forward to our Thanksgiving dinner at the Grove. Can't wait to introduce you to some colleagues. My daughter had just disinvited me from Thanksgiving. Her boss had invited me to the same restaurant, same night. Time to get ready for the most interesting Thanksgiving of my life. What Emma didn't know was that her greatest professional triumph was about to become her most humiliating moment. For 8 months, I had been Technova's primary strategic consultant under a confidentiality agreement that would make a CIA operative proud. Marcus Chen knew me only as William D. from Davis Strategic Solutions. We communicated through encrypted emails and video calls where I used voice modulation software to protect client anonymity. The irony was suffocating. Emma would come home from work buzzing with excitement about breakthrough strategic insights her team had discovered, while I sat there listening to my own recommendations filtered through Technova's management structure. 3 months ago, she'd been particularly animated about a new approach to supply chain optimization. "Dad, you should hear what our CEO is implementing. It's revolutionary. Instead of focusing on cost reduction, we're prioritizing relationship resilience." I'd nodded thoughtfully. "Interesting concept." The consultant who developed this framework calls it strategic patience versus tactical aggression. Brilliant, right? Very clever phrasing. Marcus says this approach will save us millions in acquisition costs. I'd helped myself to more dinner while she explained my own intellectual property back to me. But the real kicker came 2 weeks later. Emma burst through my front door holding a bottle of champagne. "Dad, I got promoted. Congratulations, what happened?" "Marcus called me into his office this morning. Said I've been showing exceptional strategic thinking. Promoted me to senior marketing manager with a $15,000 raise." She was glowing, absolutely radiant with professional pride. What specifically impressed him? Remember that conversation we had about vertical versus horizontal market expansion? I used those concepts in my presentation about the acquisition strategy. I nearly choked on my coffee. "You presented my dinner conversation to your CEO?" "Not exactly. I developed it into a comprehensive framework. Your framework." "Well, yeah. I mean, you were just talking casually. I was the one who saw the business application." That night, I received an email from Marcus Chen praising the innovative leadership thinking he'd observed in his marketing department. He specifically mentioned promoting a young manager who demonstrated exceptional grasp of strategic complexity. My daughter had been promoted because she'd successfully plagiarized her unemployed father's expertise, but the real bombshell was still coming. Last week, I'd noticed something odd in Emma's social media posts. She'd been mentioning exciting acquisition opportunities and game-changing strategic partnerships at work. So I did what any curious consultant would do. I checked my Technova files. The $15 million acquisition deal I'd been architecting for Marcus Chen was scheduled to be announced the week after Thanksgiving. The same acquisition Emma had been hinting about on LinkedIn, taking subtle credit for strategic insights that had shaped the deal. Here's what she didn't know. The target company, Midwest Distribution Solutions, was one of my oldest consulting clients. I'd been advising them for 6 months on optimal acquisition positioning. I was literally consulting both sides of the deal. Marcus Chen thought he was getting strategic advice from an anonymous expert. Midwest Distribution thought they were getting guidance from an independent consultant. Emma thought she was contributing innovative thinking to a major corporate initiative. In reality, I was orchestrating a complex business transaction that would save both companies millions while advancing my daughter's career. The acquisition framework Emma had been bragging about? I'd designed it specifically to highlight her department's strategic value within Technova's corporate structure. The brilliant market analysis that had impressed Marcus Chen? I'd structured it to showcase exactly the kind of thinking Emma had been demonstrating in our dinner conversations. I'd been secretly engineering my daughter's professional success while she publicly dismissed my capabilities. But there was one more piece of this puzzle Emma couldn't see. The Thanksgiving dinner at the Grove wasn't just a social gathering for Tyler's family. Marcus Chen had specifically requested it as an opportunity to introduce his strategic consultant to potential new clients. "Bill," he'd written in his latest email, "I've been working with this brilliant strategist for months. Anonymous, very exclusive client list. But I think it's time to start building some face-to-face relationships. Several people at this dinner could benefit from your expertise." Richard Brooks, Tyler's venture capitalist father, was specifically interested in meeting the consultant who designed Technova's acquisition strategy. Patricia Brooks, Tyler's mother and Stanford board member, wanted to discuss strategic planning for the university's technology partnerships. The evening Emma had planned as her networking breakthrough was actually a business dinner designed to introduce me to my next clients. While my daughter was preparing to hide me from her professional contacts, those same contacts were preparing to meet the strategists who'd been transforming their business approaches. The only question was whether I had the courage to walk into that restaurant and reveal the truth that would change everything. As I sat in my basement office, surrounded by contracts worth nearly $1 million annually, I realized this wasn't just about teaching Emma a lesson. This was about teaching her the difference between success and wisdom. The pre-Thanksgiving gathering at the Brooks house was supposed to be a casual family meet and greet. Emma had described it as just drinks and appetizers when she'd reluctantly invited me. What I walked into was a carefully orchestrated social audition. The Brooks house was lit up like a museum exhibition. Valet parking in the circular driveway. A catering staff in black uniforms serving appetizers on silver trays. This wasn't drinks with family. This was a networking event disguised as hospitality. Tyler met me at the door wearing a perfectly tailored blazer and that nervous smile wealthy people get when they're managing social dynamics. "Bill, great to see you. Come in, come in." The foyer was all marble and crystal chandeliers. Original artwork that probably cost more than most people's annual salaries. Richard Brooks appeared immediately, as if he'd been waiting. "Bill, welcome." Richard Brooks. His handshake was firm but brief. "Tyler's told us so much about you." Emma materialized beside me, wearing a black cocktail dress I'd never seen before. Something told me it hadn't come from her usual department store budget. "Dad, you remember Richard from dinner last month?" "Of course. Beautiful home, Richard." "Thank you. Patricia's worked very hard on the design. She's around here somewhere, probably coordinating the staff." We moved into the living room where about 15 people stood in small groups, all holding wine glasses and conducting the kind of conversations that happen when business cards are mentally exchanged. Emma immediately steered me toward a corner. "Dad, remember what we discussed about tonight. Just relax. Be yourself. Don't worry about trying to impress anyone." The phrasing was interesting. Don't worry about trying to impress anyone. As if she'd already determined I couldn't. Tyler's grandfather, Hamilton Brooks, held court near the fireplace. 82 years old, Stanford class of 1963, still sharp as a razor. The family patriarch who'd turned a small tech investment into generational wealth. Patricia Brooks glided over with that practiced hostess smile. "Bill, wonderful to see you again. How are you managing?" "Managing. Not how are you doing or how have you been. How are you managing?" "Very well, thank you." "Good, good. Emma mentioned you're exploring new opportunities." Before I could respond, Emma jumped in. "Dad's taking his time, evaluating different options." Hamilton Brooks approached with his cane and penetrating stare. "Young man, Tyler tells me you worked in manufacturing. 35 years in supply chain and logistics." "Ah." He nodded with the kind of polite dismissal reserved for obsolete industries. "It must have been quite a transition watching everything go digital." Emma's face tightened. "Grandpa Hamilton, Dad's learning to adapt to how business works now." Of course. Very important to stay current." The conversation continued around me as if I were a patient being discussed by doctors. Emma expertly fielded every question about my background with phrases like transitional period and exploring options and adjusting to market changes. Marcus Chen arrived at 7:30 with his wife Lisa. I watched Emma's posture change completely. Her networking mode activated like a switch. "Marcus, so glad you could make it. This is my father, Bill Davis." Marcus shook my hand with that friendly but distracted energy of a CEO working a room. "Bill, pleasure to meet you. Emma's told me you're between positions." "That's one way to put it." Emma stepped closer. "Dad's from the old economy, Marcus. Different world from what we're dealing with now." "Absolutely," Marcus agreed. "The pace of change in tech is incredible. What we're doing now with strategic frameworks and digital transformation. It's completely revolutionized how we think about business." I almost smiled. Marcus Chen was explaining digital transformation to the consultant who designed his company's entire strategic approach. "Strategic frameworks," I repeated. "Interesting area." "Oh, it's fascinating," Marcus continued. "We're working with this brilliant consultant on acquisition strategy. Anonymous, very exclusive. The insights we're getting are game-changing. Emma beamed. Marcus, you should tell Dad about some of the innovative approaches Technova is implementing. Well, without getting into confidential details, we're pioneering this concept called strategic patience versus tactical aggression. Complete paradigm shift. I nodded thoughtfully. Elegant phrase. Right? Our consultant calls it elegant complexity. Brilliant terminology. The room felt smaller suddenly. I was listening to Marcus Chen explain my own intellectual property, while my daughter smiled proudly at how impressive her boss sounded. Hamilton Brooks leaned on his cane. Marcus, this consultant sounds expensive. Worth every penny. This acquisition framework is going to save us millions. Emma couldn't contain herself. Grandpa Hamilton, I've been working directly on these strategic initiatives. Some of my insights have been incorporated into the overall framework. Richard Brooks raised his eyebrows. Emma, that's impressive for someone your age. She's exceptional, Marcus agreed. Sharp strategic thinking. That's why we promoted her to senior manager. Patricia Brooks smiled. Emma, you must have gotten that business sense from your father. The silence was deafening. Emma's face went pale. Actually, Mom Brooks, I think it's more about adapting to modern business dynamics. Dad's experience is from a different era. Different era, Hamilton repeated. What era specifically, Bill? Before I could answer, Emma intervened. Grandpa Hamilton, Dad worked in traditional manufacturing, supply chains, logistics, very different from innovation-driven industries. I see. Hamilton studied me like I was a museum artifact. And you've been looking for work in traditional manufacturing? Emma answered for me again. Dad's having to be realistic about opportunities available for people his age in legacy industries. Legacy industries. I looked around the room at these people. Tyler's family worth $40 million. Marcus Chen running a company built on strategies I'd designed. Emma glowing with pride at her promotion based on my recommendations, and realized something fundamental. They weren't just dismissing me. They were erasing me. Marcus Chen was getting rich implementing my frameworks while explaining to me how brilliant his anonymous consultant was. Emma was advancing her career using my intellectual property while publicly describing me as obsolete. The Brooks family was treating me like charity while planning to profit from business strategies I'd created. Bill, Richard Brooks said with practiced sympathy, have you considered transitioning into something more service-oriented? Retail, perhaps? Customer relations? Emma nodded encouragingly. Richard has connections throughout Austin. He might be able to make some introductions. For retail positions, I clarified. Starting positions, Patricia corrected gently. Everyone has to start somewhere. Tyler looked uncomfortable. He'd been quiet through most of this conversation, but now he was watching his family and girlfriend systematically demolish his future father-in-law's dignity. Actually, Tyler said slowly, Bill, what exactly did you do in supply chain management? Emma's eyes flashed warning signals. Tyler, Dad handled logistics coordination, moving products from point A to point B. For 35 years, I added quietly. Different skill set from strategic thinking, Emma continued, more operational than visionary. Hamilton Brooks nodded sagely. Operational work is honest work, Bill. Nothing wrong with that. Honest work, as if strategic consulting required dishonesty. I looked at my daughter, beautiful and ambitious and completely convinced that her unemployed father was an embarrassment to be managed rather than a person to be respected. Emma, I said quietly, do you really believe that? Believe what? That 35 years of professional experience equals moving boxes from point A to point B. She hesitated. For just a moment I saw uncertainty in her eyes. Then her networking instincts kicked in. Dad, let's not get into details here. These folks understand that industries evolve. That's when I made the decision that would change everything. The Grove restaurant was exactly the kind of place Emma had dreamed about. Valet parking, waiters in white gloves, wine lists with bottles that cost more than some people's rent. Tyler's family had reserved the private dining room for 12 people. I'd spent an hour getting ready. $3,000 Armani suit, Italian leather shoes, the Rolex Submariner I'd bought myself after landing my third Fortune 500 consulting contract. Hair perfectly styled, portfolio case with my most impressive client testimonials. Emma didn't know I was coming. Marcus Chen had invited me as his guest. introducing his strategic consultant to potential new clients. As my Uber pulled up to the restaurant entrance, I could see Tyler's Tesla and the Brooks family Mercedes already parked out front. Through the large windows, I spotted the private dining room where Emma was probably networking with calculated precision. The maitre d' recognized me immediately. "Mr. Davis, welcome back. Mr. Chen's party is expecting you in the Wellington room." I'd been dining at the Grove for 6 months, ever since my consulting business had taken off. The staff knew me as a regular who tipped well and brought important clients. Walking through the main dining room, I could hear Emma's laughter from the private area. She was probably charming Tyler's grandparents with stories about her strategic insights at Technova. What she was about to discover was that those insights belonged to someone else. I paused outside the Wellington room entrance, looking through the glass at the perfectly arranged dinner party. Emma sat between Tyler and Marcus Chen, animated and confident. The Brooks family clustered around Hamilton, their patriarch holding court. 2 venture capitalist couples completed the group, exactly the kind of networking opportunity Emma had dreamed about. This was her moment, her carefully orchestrated introduction to Austin's tech elite. It was about to become mine. I opened the door. The conversation stopped mid-sentence. Emma's face went from confusion to panic in less than 2 seconds. Tyler looked puzzled. The Brooks family stared. Marcus Chen stood up immediately, his face lighting up with genuine excitement. "Bill, you made it. Everyone, I want you to meet someone very special." Emma's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She was staring at me like I was a ghost who'd materialized at her networking dinner. "This is William Davis," Marcus continued, "the strategic consultant I've been telling you about, the mastermind behind Technova's acquisition framework." Hamilton Brooks set down his wineglass. "This is your anonymous consultant?" "The one and only," Marcus beamed. "Bill, meet Hamilton Brooks, Stanford alumnus, early tech investor. Richard and Patricia Brooks, venture capital. And of course you know Emma." The silence in the room was deafening. Emma looked like she was having trouble breathing. Richard Brooks stood up, extending his hand. "Bill, Marcus has told us incredible things about your work. Brilliant strategic thinking." I shook his hand firmly. "Thank you, Richard. I've enjoyed the challenges." Patricia Brooks was staring between Emma and me. "Wait, Bill, you're Emma's father?" "I am." "But Emma said, we understood you were unemployed." Marcus looked confused. "Unemployed?" "Bill runs one of the most exclusive consulting practices in Texas, Davis Strategic Solutions." Emma finally found her voice. "Dad, what are you doing here?" "Marcus invited me. We've been working together for 8 months. Tyler's eyes were wide. "Working together how?" Marcus answered enthusiastically. "Bill designed our entire acquisition strategy. The $15 million Midwest distribution deal, that's Bill's framework, saved us over $3 million in operational costs." Hamilton Brooks leaned forward on his cane. "Young man, are you telling me you're the consultant who created the strategic patience versus tactical aggression methodology?" "I am." "Remarkable work. Richard and I have been discussing implementing similar approaches in our portfolio companies." Emma's face had gone completely white. "Dad, I don't understand." "What don't you understand, Emma?" "You're unemployed. You've been looking for work for 2 years." Marcus laughed. "Looking for work? Bill's got a waiting list of Fortune 500 clients. We're lucky we found him when we did." I pulled out my business card, heavy stock, embossed lettering, contact information for Davis Strategic Solutions, LLC. "Emma, I've been running my own consulting firm since 18 months after the layoffs." Tyler took the card, examining it. "This is a real business?" "Very real," Patricia Brooks confirmed, looking at her phone. "I just looked it up. Impressive client testimonials." Richard Brooks was studying me with new interest. "Bill, what's your annual revenue?" "Last year, $890,000. This year, we'll break $1 million." Emma's voice was barely a whisper. $1 million? Give or take. Marcus was getting excited. "And here's the brilliant part. Emma works for me, and she's been demonstrating exactly the kind of strategic thinking Bill specializes in. It's obviously genetic." I looked at my daughter. "Actually, Marcus, it's more direct than that." "How so?" "Emma, remember our dinner conversation 3 months ago, when I explained the difference between vertical and horizontal market expansion?" Her eyes went wide. "No. You used that exact framework in your presentation to Marcus the next week." Marcus looked between us. "Wait, what?" "The promotion Emma received? It was based on strategic insights she learned from me over dinner. She just didn't realize where they came from. The room was completely silent now. Emma looked like she wanted to disappear. Tyler found his voice first.
Emma, you knew your dad was a consultant? No, I thought... You thought what? I asked gently. I thought you were unemployed. Because I never corrected that assumption. Hamilton Brooks was watching this family drama unfold with fascination. Bill, why would you let your own daughter believe you were unemployed? I sat down in the empty chair Marcus had saved for me, because I wanted to see how she'd treat someone she thought had nothing to offer. The silence stretched longer. Patricia Brooks spoke carefully. And how did she treat you? Emma's voice cracked. Mom Brooks, please don't. She disinvited me from Thanksgiving dinner, I said quietly. Told me I'd be embarrassing around people like you. Richard Brooks set down his wine glass hard. She what? Emma told me that unemployed people don't belong at networking dinners with tech executives and venture capitalists. Tyler turned to stare at his fiancée.
Emma, is that true? Emma's eyes filled with tears. It wasn't like that. How was it? I asked. I was trying to protect you from feeling uncomfortable. Uncomfortable around whom? Around people who operate at a different level. Marcus Chen looked genuinely confused. Emma, your father operates at the highest level. He's consulted for companies worth billions. Hamilton Brooks leaned back in his chair. Young lady, do you realize your father is probably the most successful person at this table? Emma buried her face in her hands. I reached across the table and gently touched her arm. Emma, look at me. She raised her head, tears streaming down her face. I didn't reveal my business to embarrass you. I revealed it because I wanted you to understand something important. What? Success isn't about age, industry, or appearance. It's about adding value. And the moment you start judging people by their circumstances instead of their character, you stop learning from them. Tyler's voice was quiet. Emma, how could you not know your own father was successful? Because she never asked, I replied. She assumed. Marcus Chen shook his head slowly. Emma, every strategic breakthrough you've had at work came from your father? Emma nodded miserably. And you've been telling people he was unemployed? Another nod. Richard Brooks stood up. Bill, I owe you an apology. We treated you poorly based on completely false information. You treated me exactly how Emma taught you to treat me. Patricia Brooks was staring at Emma with disappointment. Emma, dear, this is quite shocking behavior. I stood up. Emma, I want you to think about something. Tonight was supposed to be your networking breakthrough. Instead, it became mine. Marcus just introduced me to my next 3 clients. Emma looked around the table at the faces staring back at her. Tyler's family seeing her clearly for the first time, her boss realizing the truth about her strategic insights, her fiancé questioning her values. Dad, I'm sorry. I know you are, but sorry isn't enough anymore. What do you mean? I mean we need to establish some new boundaries about respect. The silence in the Wellington room was deafening. Emma sat frozen while Tyler's family and her CEO processed what they'd just witnessed. Her networking dinner had become a masterclass in how assumptions destroy relationships. Marcus Chen was the first to speak. Bill, I have to ask, why the secrecy? Why not tell Emma about your consulting business? I adjusted my suit jacket, feeling the weight of 8 months of hidden success. Marcus, imagine your daughter spent 2 years treating you like a failure. Would you reward that behavior by revealing your achievements? Hamilton Brooks nodded slowly. Testing character, not circumstances. Exactly. Tyler turned to Emma, his voice careful. Em, I need to understand something. You really believed your dad was unemployed this whole time? Emma's voice was barely audible. Yes. But you never helped him? Never tried to use your network to find him opportunities? I offered to ask Richard about retail positions. Richard Brooks winced. Retail positions? For a man earning nearly $1 million annually. Patricia Brooks shook her head. Emma, dear, your father has been sitting at our dinner table while we discussed his need for entry-level opportunities. The venture capitalist couples had been quietly observing, but now Michael Torres, managing partner at Hill Country Ventures, leaned forward. Bill, I'm curious about your client acquisition strategy. How do you identify companies ready for strategic transformation? Emma looked stricken as she realized the networking conversation was continuing around her, but now her father was the center of attention. It's about recognizing the gap between current performance and potential capability, I explained. Most companies know they're underperforming. They just don't know why. Like Technova's acquisition approach? Asked Sarah Kim, Torres's partner. Marcus Chen nodded enthusiastically. Bill completely redesigned our framework. We went from struggling with integration costs to having the most efficient acquisition model in our sector. What's your typical engagement fee? Hamilton Brooks asked directly. Depends on complexity. Strategic planning runs 60 to 90,000. Full transformation projects can reach 200,000. Emma's face went pale. 200,000. Per project, I clarified. Tyler was doing math in his head. Dad, Bill, how many clients do you work with annually? Last year, 12 major engagements. This year, 15. Richard Brooks pulled out his phone. Bill, I'm looking at your client testimonials. Impressive results. Saved $4.2 million in operational costs. Increased efficiency 47%. Strategic framework exceeded all expectations. Those are real numbers from real companies. Marcus Chen was getting animated. And here's what's incredible. Emma has been absorbing these strategic insights through family conversations, then applying them brilliantly at work. Emma looked confused. I don't understand. Your promotion, Emma. It happened because you presented strategic concepts you'd learned from your father, concepts that came directly from my consulting sessions with him. Tyler's voice was quiet. So Emma's career success is built on Bill's expertise? Partly, I acknowledged. But Emma has natural talent. She just didn't know where her best ideas were coming from. Hamilton Brooks leaned on his cane. Bill, this raises an interesting question about intellectual property. How so? Emma's been using your strategic frameworks to advance her career while dismissing your professional capabilities. That's quite a contradiction. Emma finally found her voice. I didn't know they were his frameworks. Patricia Brooks spoke gently. But dear, didn't you wonder where these brilliant insights were coming from? I thought I was developing them myself. Based on casual dinner conversations with an unemployed man? Richard asked pointedly. The room fell silent again. Michael Torres cleared his throat. Bill, I'd like to discuss potential consulting work for our portfolio companies. Of course. But first, I'm curious how you plan to handle this family situation. All eyes turned to me. Emma looked terrified. That depends on Emma. How so? Emma has a choice. She can continue believing that success comes from networking and image management, or she can learn that success comes from adding value and respecting people regardless of their apparent circumstances. Tyler spoke up. What would that look like practically? Emma needs to decide whether she wants a relationship based on honesty or one based on managing appearances. Emma's voice was shaking. Dad, I want to make this right. How? I don't know. Tell me what to do. I looked around the table at these successful, wealthy people who had just learned they'd been systematically underestimating someone based on incomplete information. First, you apologize to everyone here for misrepresenting my situation. Emma took a shaky breath. Everyone, I'm deeply sorry. I gave you completely false information about my father. He's not unemployed. He's not struggling. He's more successful than I am, and I've been ashamed of him for no reason. Second, I continued, you acknowledge where your strategic insights actually came from. Marcus, my promotion was based on ideas I learned from my father. I presented his intellectual property as my own thinking, not intentionally, but because I didn't respect his expertise enough to recognize its value. Marcus Chen nodded. Understood. Though to be clear, Emma, your ability to apply these concepts shows real talent. Third, I said, you decide whether you want Tyler's family to know the real you or the version you think they want to see. Tyler reached for Emma's hand. I want to know the real you. Emma looked around the table. The real me is someone who almost destroyed her relationship with the most important person in her life because I was more concerned with impressing strangers than honoring family. Hamilton Brooks spoke slowly. Young lady, that's quite an admission. It's the truth. I stood up. Emma, we'll talk more later. Right now, these folks want to discuss business.
For the next hour, I fielded questions about strategic consulting while Emma sat quietly, watching her unemployed father network with her fiancé's family and her boss. By the end of the evening, I had 3 new client referrals and a consulting contract worth $180,000. Emma had learned the difference between success and wisdom. The phone started ringing at 7 a.m. the next morning. First call was from Hamilton Brooks. "Bill, I've been thinking about our conversation last night. Hill Country Enterprises could use strategic guidance on our technology acquisitions. When can we meet?" Second call was Patricia Brooks. "Bill, Stanford's Technology Partnership Program needs consulting on strategic frameworks. Are you available for a retainer engagement?" Third call was Richard Brooks. "Bill, my venture capital partners want to discuss strategic consulting for our entire portfolio. Can you handle multiple simultaneous engagements?" By noon, I had commitments for over $300,000 in new business, all because my daughter had tried to hide me from the exact people who needed my expertise. Emma didn't call until afternoon. "Dad, can we talk?" "Of course. I mean, in person. I need to see you." An hour later, she stood in my townhouse living room looking around at the space she'd been dismissing as evidence of my failure. The Herman Miller office chair visible through my basement doorway, the stack of Fortune 500 contracts on my kitchen table, the professional awards I'd never mentioned. "Dad, how long have you been running this business?" 18 months, and you never told me. I was waiting to see who you really were." She sat down heavily on my couch. "Who am I?" "That's for you to decide." Tyler's family called off the engagement. I felt my heart sink. "Emma, I'm sorry." "No, Dad, they were right to." Hamilton Brooks told Tyler that marrying someone who could treat family that way was a character risk he couldn't afford. What did Tyler say? That he needed time to think about whether he really knew me. We sat in silence for several minutes. "Dad, Marcus wants to meet with me Monday morning." "About what?" "My promotion. He wants to discuss whether I earned it honestly." "What will you tell him?" "The truth, that my best strategic insights came from you, that I built my credibility on your intellectual property without realizing it." "And then what?" "Probably lose my promotion, maybe my job." I studied my daughter's face. For the first time in 2 years, she looked genuinely humble. "Emma, do you know why I didn't reveal my business earlier? To teach me a lesson about judging people." "Partly, but mostly because I wanted to see if you loved me or just tolerated me." Her eyes filled with tears. "And what did you conclude?" "That you loved the idea of me, but not the reality of me." "Dad, that's not fair." "Isn't it? You loved me when I was successful enough to pay for your college, but not when I appeared unsuccessful. You loved me when I gave you strategic advice, but not when you thought I was unemployable. I was trying to protect my career." "From your own father." The words hung in the air between us. "Dad, what happens now?" "That depends on what you want. I want my father back. Your unemployed father, or your successful father. I want the father who raised me to be better than this." I reached across and took her hand. "Emma, I'm going to tell you something important. Your promotion at Technova? You earned it." "How?" "You just proved I was using your ideas. You took complex strategic concepts and applied them brilliantly in a completely different context. That requires intelligence and insight. But I didn't know they were your concepts." "Which means you absorbed them naturally and understood their applications instinctively. That's talent, Emma. So I shouldn't give back the promotion. You should be honest with Marcus about where the ideas originated. Let him decide what that means for your position. And if he demotes me, then you'll learn that integrity costs something. But you'll still have integrity." Emma looked around my living room again. "Dad, will you teach me about strategic consulting, about business, about how to actually add value instead of just managing appearances? Are you sure you want to learn from an unemployed has-been from the old economy?" She winced. "I deserve that." "Yes, you do. But will you teach me anyway?" I smiled. "Emma, I've been waiting 2 years for you to ask that question. Where do we start? With honesty, about everything. No more managing my image to fit your networking goals. Deal. And respect. For my experience, my expertise, and my dignity." "Deal. And boundaries. I won't accept being treated as an embarrassment ever again." I understand. I stood up and walked to my basement office, returning with a contract. Emma, read this. She scanned the document. This is a consulting agreement with Midwest Distribution Solutions for $200,000. That deal was finalized yesterday. Want to know who referred them? Who? Tyler's grandfather. Turns out respect generates more business than networking dinners. Emma looked at the contract, then at me. Dad, I've been incredibly stupid. Yes, you have, but stupid is fixable. Character deficiency is harder. Do you think I have character deficiency? I think you have character confusion. We can work on that. For the first time in 2 years, my daughter looked at me like I was someone worth listening to. 3 weeks later, Emma and I sat in my basement office, reviewing her strategic analysis of Technova's quarterly performance.
She'd kept her promotion after an honest conversation with Marcus Chen, who decided that applying strategic thinking was more valuable than originating it. Tyler had called off their engagement, but gently. I need to marry someone who treats family with respect, he'd told her. Maybe someday that'll be you. Emma had moved back to a smaller apartment, started paying her own way completely, and begun learning the consulting business from the ground up. Dad, I have a question. Shoot. Why did you let me believe you were struggling for so long? I set down my pen and looked at her. Because I needed to know who you really were, not who you wanted me to think you were. And who am I? You're someone who got lost in appearances but found her way back to substance. Was it worth it? Losing Tyler, nearly losing my job, having his family think I'm shallow? Emma, do you know what the most valuable thing in business is? Revenue? Trust. When people trust you, they give you their most important problems to solve. When they don't trust you, you get the problems nobody else wants. And trust comes from character. Character plus competence. You've always had competence. Now you're building character. She smiled. Even if it cost me my social status? Your social status was built on hiding who your family really was. That's not status, that's performance art. Emma laughed. Dad, I want you to know something. What's that? I'm proud to be your daughter, not because you're successful, but because you had the dignity to let me fail until I chose to succeed. That's the most intelligent thing you've said in 2 years. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus Chen. Bill, Emma's quarterly analysis was exceptional. She's ready for bigger strategic projects. I showed Emma the message. Dad, do you think Tyler will ever give me another chance? That depends. Are you asking because you miss him, or because you miss his family's social status? She thought for a long moment. I miss him. The status was never real anyway. Then maybe you've learned the difference between love and networking. Will you help me figure out how to apologize properly? Emma, the best apology is becoming someone who doesn't need to apologize for the same thing twice. She nodded. Then let's get back to work. For the first time since her mother died, I felt like I had my daughter back. If you're watching this story, remember, never let anyone convince you that your worth depends on their opinion of your circumstances. Dignity isn't given. It's earned through character. And if you've ever had to choose between enabling someone's worst instincts and teaching them to be better, choose the lesson. Love that doesn't challenge people to grow isn't really love at all. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and whether you've ever had to set boundaries with family who forgot your worth.